My name is Lena, and I'm 27 years old. For 3 years after my accident, my mother told everyone I was getting better, practically cured, she'd say with that perfect smile. But when she set up cameras in our living room and demanded I stand up to prove it, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't about my recovery anymore. It never had been. If you're watching this, drop a comment on where you're from, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories about family secrets that change everything. I've learned that love can wear many faces. My mother, Vivian, taught me that lesson well. From the outside, she's everything a devoted mother should be. Attentive, caring, always by my side. But behind closed doors, when the cameras stop rolling and the guests go home, her face shifts into something I still can't quite name. Something cold. Something hungry. It's been 3 years since the accident. 3 years since the car crash that left me with partial paralysis from the waist down, confined to this wheelchair that's become both my prison and my only means of freedom. The doctors said I was lucky to survive. My mother said I was lucky to have her. Maybe I believed that once. The morning of her charity luncheon, I woke to the sound of her heels clicking down the hallway. Sharp, purposeful sounds that always made my stomach tighten. She pushed open my bedroom door without knocking. She never knocked, and plastered on that bright smile she reserved for the hours between sunrise and the first guest's arrival. "Good morning, sweetheart," she sang, though her eyes scanned me like I was a project that needed fixing. "Big day today. Let's get you presentable." She helped me into the dress she'd chosen. Powder blue with delicate lace at the collar, something that made me look soft and fragile. Exactly the image she wanted. Her hands were efficient as she adjusted my collar, smoothed my hair, arranged me like a doll on a shelf. Then, as she fastened the last button, her voice dropped to a whisper only I could hear. "Try not to make today about you." The words landed like stones in my chest. I wanted to ask what she meant, wanted to remind her that I hadn't asked to be paraded in front of her friends, but my hands found the armrests of my wheelchair instead, trembling slightly. I'd learned that silence was safer. By noon, our home had transformed into a showcase of elegance. White tablecloths, fresh flowers, champagne flutes catching the sunlight. Women in designer dresses air-kissed each other's cheeks, while my mother floated through the crowd like a queen holding court. And me? I was wheeled to the center of the living room, positioned where everyone could see me, where everyone could admire my mother's devotion. That's when she transformed. The cold woman who'd dressed me that morning vanished, replaced by someone warm and radiant. She rested her hand on my shoulder, a gesture that looked protective but felt like a claim of ownership, and addressed her guests with that practiced catch in her voice. "You all know my Lena," she said, squeezing my shoulder just a bit too hard. "She's been so brave through everything. And I have to say, she's improving every day. Honestly, she's practically cured." Practically cured. The words echoed in my head as I felt dozens of eyes turn toward me, scanning my legs, my wheelchair, my lap, searching for evidence of this miraculous recovery my mother had just announced. My face burned. I wanted to sink into the floor. An older woman in pearls leaned forward, her smile patronizing. "Oh, that's wonderful. Can you stand yet, dear?" Before I could open my mouth, my mother's voice cut through. "Oh, she's being modest." Her fingers dug deeper into my shoulder. "She's stronger than she lets on." I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste copper. This was her performance, not mine. I was just the prop. The doorbell rang, and my mother's face lit up like Christmas morning. "That must be the reporter," she breathed, her excitement genuine for the first time all day. She'd been competing for months to be featured in a local magazine's spotlight on parents of children with miraculous recoveries. Never mind that my recovery was anything but miraculous. Never mind that I still couldn't feel my legs most days. The reporter was a young woman with kind eyes and a digital recorder. She settled into the chair across from me, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe someone would finally ask me how I actually felt. Maybe someone would see past my mother's performance. "Lena," the reporter began gently, What are some of the challenges you face day to day? I open my mouth, searching for honest words. The truth was complicated. The physical pain, yes, but also the isolation, the constant pressure to improve on someone else's timeline, the weight of being both visible and invisible at once. But my mother's laugh cut through the air like glass shattering. Challenges? Oh, she's exaggerating. Lena's always been a bit dramatic. She waved her hand dismissively. The truth is, she'll be walking any day now. We just know it. The reporter's pen paused on her notepad. She glanced at me, and I saw something flicker in her expression. Doubt, maybe, or concern. But she didn't push. No one ever pushed when my mother was in the room. I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller and smaller, until I was just a story my mother was telling. Not a person. Not even really her daughter. Just evidence of her devotion, her strength, her ability to handle tragedy with grace. The doorbell rang again, and Nurse Callahan stepped through, carrying a clipboard with my latest medical forms. He was my physical therapist, a tall man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and eyes that actually looked at you when you spoke. He'd been working with me for 6 months, and he was the only person who ever asked how I felt before asking how much I could do. He paused in the doorway, taking in the scene, the elegant guests, the reporter, my mother's glowing performance, and me, sitting in the center of it all like an exhibit. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he said nothing. Just handed my mother the forms and gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. My mother barely glanced at the papers. She was too busy orchestrating her next move. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and suddenly she was recording. Her voice took on that syrupy quality that made my skin crawl. "Everyone, I want to capture this moment," she announced, turning the camera toward me. "Show everyone how strong you are, sweetheart." My throat tightened. "Not here," I whispered. "Please." But she was already moving closer. The phone lens pointed at my face like an accusation. Her smile never wavered, but her voice dropped to a hiss only I could hear. "Don't ruin this for me." Then louder, for the camera and the crowd. "Come on, Lena. Stand up. Just for a moment. Show them what you can do." The room fell silent. Every eye was on me. The reporter's recorder was still running. The camera was rolling. And my mother's smile was frozen in place, waiting for me to perform the miracle she'd promised everyone I could deliver. I gripped the armrests of my wheelchair. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold on. I tried. God, I tried. I pushed with everything I had, willing my legs to cooperate, to hold me, to give my mother what she wanted so desperately. My legs trembled violently. My knees buckled before I'd even lifted myself an inch. And then I collapsed back into the chair, gasping, humiliated, broken. My mother's face transformed. The mask slipped, and for just a second, I saw something raw and ugly underneath. Rage. Disappointment. Shame, not for me but because of me. "Stop embarrassing me," she hissed. The room seemed to freeze. Someone coughed awkwardly. A champagne flute clinked against a table. And then I heard footsteps, steady, purposeful footsteps moving toward us. Nurse Callahan stepped between me and my mother, his voice calm but firm. "Ma'am, that's enough." My mother's expression shifted so fast it gave me whiplash. The rage vanished, replaced instantly by wounded confusion, the perfect picture of a misunderstood parent. She pressed her hand to her chest, her voice rising just enough to sound offensive, without seeming aggressive. "This is between me and my daughter," she said, her eyes never leaving Callahan's face. "I don't think you understand what we've been through together." But Callahan didn't move. He stood there, solid as a wall, his presence somehow making the room feel less suffocating. "I understand that she's in pain," he said quietly, "and that she needs support, not pressure." The crowd began to shift uncomfortably. Conversations picked up again, forced and brittle. Women gathered their purses. Someone mentioned needing to leave early. My mother's perfect luncheon was unraveling, and I could see her scrambling to regain control. She forced a laugh, bright and hollow. "Lena's just having a shy day," she announced to no one in particular. "You know how young people are, so self-conscious." She touched my hair like I was a child, and I flinched. Callahan moved to the side of my wheelchair and released the brake. "Let's get you some air," he said to me, his voice low enough that only I could hear. He wheeled me toward the hallway, away from the cameras and the staring eyes and my mother's crumbling performance. In the quiet of the dim hallway, he knelt beside my chair. That's when he noticed them, the faint purple marks on my wrist, barely visible unless you were looking. His jaw tightened. "Does she do that often?" he asked carefully. "Pressure you physically?" The question hung in the air. I should have answered immediately. I should have told him the truth. But years of conditioning had built walls inside me, walls that whispered the same things my mother always said. "She's just trying to help. She wants what's best. She loves you. She just wants me to get better." I whispered, the words automatic. Callahan's eyes searched mine. I could see him choosing his words carefully, trying not to spook me. "Progress doesn't work like that, Lena. Real healing takes time. And you're not safe if she keeps forcing you to do things your body isn't ready for." No one had ever said that to me before. Not the other nurses, not the doctors, not the physical therapists who came and went. They all deferred to my mother, trusted her to know what was best. But Callahan was seeing something different. He was seeing me. Before I could respond, my mother's heels clicked down the hallway. She appeared around the corner, her face a mask of controlled fury. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she asked, her voice dangerously sweet. "I didn't give you permission to take my daughter away from her own party." "She needed a break," Callahan said evenly. "She's fine." "Aren't you fine, sweetheart?" My mother looked at me expectantly, and I felt that familiar pressure building in my chest, the need to agree, to smooth things over, to make everything okay again. But Callahan spoke before I could. "I'll be filing an incident report about what happened today." My mother's eyes went cold. "You're overstepping your boundaries, Mr. Callahan. I think it's time you left." "I'll leave when I'm ready." He didn't raise his voice, but there was steel underneath. "And I'll be back for Lena's next session. Unless you'd prefer I refer her to another therapist who might be more interested in documenting these episodes." The threat hung between them. My mother's smile never wavered, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. She knew he'd seen too much. And he knew that she knew. "We'll discuss this later," my mother said tightly. "Come along, Lena." The ride home was silent, the kind of silence that felt like being trapped underwater. My mother's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. I sat in the passenger seat, my wheelchair folded in the trunk, and counted the streetlights passing by just to have something to focus on besides the tension. Finally, as we pulled into the driveway, she spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but each word landed like a blow. "You humiliated me today." "I'm sorry," I said automatically. The words were reflex by now. She didn't respond, just got out of the car, retrieved my wheelchair, and helped me transfer into it with movements that were just a bit too rough, a bit too careless. Once inside the house, she locked the wheelchair brakes, tighter than necessary, the metal grinding, and walked away without another word. I sat in the kitchen for an hour, maybe more, unable to move without unlocking the brakes myself. The house felt enormous and empty around me. This was her punishment, abandonment, leaving me stranded in my own home, helpless, a reminder of how much I needed her. When she finally returned to release the brakes, she didn't acknowledge what she'd done. Just moved through the kitchen making dinner as if nothing had happened, humming softly to herself. I'd learned not to bring up these moments. Confronting her only made things worse. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The house was dark and quiet, but I could hear my mother's voice drifting from the living room. She was on the phone with someone, her voice low but sharp with frustration. I wheeled myself closer to my bedroom door, my heart pounding. "If she won't cooperate, there's no point keeping her here," my mother was saying. "I've given her everything. Everything. And this is how she repays me? By making me look like a fool." My stomach dropped. What did she mean? No point keeping her here? Where else would I go? I had no job, no money of my own, no independence. She controlled everything, my medical care, my finances, my entire life. The conversation ended, and I quickly wheeled back to my bed, my hands shaking as I tried to look like I'd been asleep the whole time. But my mind was racing. For the first time, I wondered if I was actually in danger. Not just emotional danger, but something more immediate, more real. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and pulled up Callahan's contact information. He'd given me his number months ago, but I'd never used it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What would I even say? My mother is angry at me. My mother said something scary on the phone. It sounded paranoid, dramatic, all the things she always accused me of being. But I typed anyway. Thank you for today. His response came faster than I expected. You don't need to thank me. Are you safe? I stared at the question. Was I safe? I didn't know how to answer that. I think so, I typed back. If you ever feel unsafe, message me. I'll help. I mean that. I saved his number under a different name, just in case my mother ever looked through my phone. Then I set the phone on my nightstand and pulled the blankets up to my chin, trying to make myself small. Around midnight, I heard my door creak open. I froze. Through barely open eyes, I could see my mother's silhouette standing in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching me in the darkness. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. Too soft. We're going to fix your attitude tomorrow. Then she closed the door, and I was alone again in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs. Morning came too quickly. I barely slept, and when sunlight finally crept through my curtains, I felt exhausted down to my bones. But my mother was already awake, already dressed, already moving through the house with that manic energy that always meant she was planning something. She appeared in my doorway with a cup of coffee and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Good morning, sleepyhead, she chirped. Get dressed. We're going to the clinic. I blinked, confused. I don't have an appointment today. Well, now you do. She set the coffee on my nightstand, too cheerful, too bright. I found someone who can really help you. Someone who understands that healing is about mindset. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I knew that tone. I'd heard it before, right before she dragged me to some new specialist or tried some experimental treatment that left me worse off than before. But I also knew better than to argue when she used that voice. The clinic was on the outskirts of town in a building that looked more like a spa than a medical facility. Soft music played in the waiting room. Everything smelled like lavender and false promises. My mother practically vibrated with excitement as she wheeled me inside. A man emerged from one of the treatment rooms, tall, tanned, with teeth too white and a smile too practiced. He wore scrubs, but something about him felt off. Wrong. You must be Vivian, he said, shaking my mother's hand like they were old friends. And this must be Lena. I'm Dr. Harlow. Doctor. The word felt like a lie, but I couldn't explain why. My mother beamed. Dr. Harlow specializes in mind-over-body healing, she explained, as if this were perfectly normal. He's helped so many people overcome their limitations. Limitations. Not injuries. Not medical conditions. Limitations. Dr. Harlow gestured to his office, and my mother wheeled me inside. She pulled out her wallet, and I watched as she counted out $100 bills, cash, not insurance. She handed the money to him discreetly, and he pocketed it without counting. Now, Lena, he said, turning to me with that practiced smile. Your mother tells me you've been struggling to regain mobility. Is that correct? I have a spinal injury, I said flatly. From a car accident. Right. He waved his hand dismissively. But the body is capable of remarkable things when we remove mental blocks. Often, what we think of as physical limitations are really just excuses our mind creates to protect us from fear. My jaw clenched. It's not mental. It's neurological. Everything is mental, ultimately. He stood up, moving toward me. Let's try something. I want you to stand up. Don't think about whether you can or can't. Just do it. I can't. See? That's the mental block talking. He reached for my arms. The body obeys the mind when excuses are removed. Come on. Try. I looked at my mother, hoping she'd see how wrong this was, how dangerous. But she was already recording on her phone again, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. I tried. God help me, I tried. Not because I believed him, but because I was afraid of what my mother would do if I didn't. I gripped the armrests, pushed with everything I had, willing my legs to respond. They didn't. They wouldn't. My whole body shook with the effort, sweat breaking out across my forehead, but nothing happened. My legs remained dead weight beneath me. See, my mother said, her voice tinged with frustration. She's resisting. Resisting. As if I had any choice. As if this were something I could control, if I just wanted it badly enough. Dr. Harlow nodded thoughtfully, as if I'd just confirmed his diagnosis. This is common. Years of learned helplessness create powerful barriers. I recommend an intensive breakthrough treatment program. For weeks, twice daily sessions. It's expensive, but the results speak for themselves. My mother didn't even hesitate. How much? $12,000 for the complete program.
$12,000.
The number echoed in my head. That was money for my father's life insurance policy, the one he'd left specifically for my long-term medical care. My mother was supposed to manage it responsibly, use it for legitimate treatment, therapy, equipment I needed. But she was nodding, already pulling out her phone to discuss payment plans. Too eager. Too desperate for this miracle cure that would somehow prove she'd fix me, that she was the devoted mother everyone believed her to be. Wait, I said, my voice shaking. I don't want this treatment. It doesn't make sense. I need real physical therapy, not what? My mother's voice turned sharp. Not help? You've been in that chair for 3 years, Lena. 3 years of me giving you everything, and you're still not walking. Maybe it's time we tried something different. That money is supposed to be for my care, and I'm using it for your care. She spoke through clenched teeth, the performance dropping completely. That money is mine to manage. Your father left it to me to take care of you, and that's exactly what I'm doing. You're not walking because you don't try hard enough. The room spun. I felt like I was drowning, suffocating under the weight of her delusion. She actually believed this. She actually thought my paralysis was a choice I was making, an act of defiance against her. The door opened, and Nurse Callahan stepped through. I'd never been so relieved to see someone in my life. He worked part-time at this facility, something I'd forgotten until that moment, and his expression turned dark when he saw what was happening. What's going on here? He asked, his eyes moving between Dr. Harlow, my mother, and me. Dr. Harlow straightened, suddenly defensive. We're discussing treatment options for a patient. Treatment options? Callahan stepped closer, his voice hardening. Why are you treating a spinal cord injury with motivational speeches and mind-over-matter nonsense? Where's her medical file? What's your specialty? I have extensive experience in holistic healing. That's not a medical specialty. Callahan turned to my mother. Did you check his credentials? Did you verify he's actually qualified to treat spinal injuries? My mother's face flushed. He came highly recommended. By whom? Instagram influencers? Callahan pulled out his phone. I'm looking him up right now. Dr. Harlow, is it? Let's see what the medical board has to say about your practice. Dr. Harlow's smile finally cracked. This is highly inappropriate. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Not until I'm sure my patient is safe. Callahan moved to my wheelchair. Lena, do you want this treatment? I looked at my mother, at Dr. Harlow, at Callahan standing there like a shield between me and them.
No, y wish para.
I don't. My mother's face went pale, then red. Lena, don't be ridiculous. We're leaving. Callahan released my wheelchair brake and started steering me toward the door. My mother grabbed the handles, trying to stop him. You can't just take her. She's my daughter. And she's an adult who just declined treatment. Or does her consent not matter to you? The words hung in the air like an accusation. We left Dr. Harlow's office in tense silence, my mother following behind, her heels clicking furiously against the floor. In the parking lot, she unleashed. How dare you interfere with my daughter's care? How dare you turn her against me? I'll report you to your supervisor. I'll have your license revoked. Go ahead, Callahan said calmly, helping me into the car. Because when you do, I'll show them the video of you trying to force a woman with a spinal injury to stand for your social media followers. I'll show them the bruises. I'll show them everything. My mother fell silent. For the first time, she realized someone was actually fighting back. On the drive home, she didn't say a word, but I could feel the rage radiating off her in waves. When we got to the house, she slammed the car door so hard the windows rattled. I waited in the car, afraid to go inside. Callahan had followed us home, and he walked up to my window, his expression concerned. "Are you going to be okay?" he asked quietly. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe I would be, but the truth was I didn't know. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about Dr. Harlow, about the $12,000, about my mother's desperation to prove I could be fixed. And then I remembered something, a drawer in my father's old desk that my mother thought I didn't know about. I wheeled myself to his study, a room my mother rarely entered anymore. The desk was covered in dust, untouched since he died. I opened the bottom drawer, searching through old papers and files. That's when I found them: grant applications, medical reports, financial statements. My hands shook as I read through them. My mother had applied for a special medical recovery grant worth $80,000, claiming I'd shown significant progress toward full mobility and would be walking independently within 6 months. The application was dated 3 months ago. 3 months ago, when I could barely transfer from my wheelchair to my bed without help. She'd lied. She'd fabricated my progress to get money. Money that would only be released if I showed continued improvement. Money that required proof of the miracle recovery she'd been promising everyone. Suddenly, everything made sense. The charity luncheon, the reporter, Dr. Harlow, the constant pressure to stand, to perform, to prove I was getting better. She didn't need me to walk because she loved me. She needed me to walk because she'd already spent money she didn't have yet, money she'd only receive if I could prove I was cured. I was never her daughter. I was an investment, a project, a source of income and social capital. The family dinner was my mother's idea, of course. She announced it 2 days after the incident at Dr. Harlow's clinic, her voice bright and cheerful as if nothing had happened. "We're having the relatives over," she said, arranging flowers in a vase with meticulous care. "It'll be good for you to see everyone. They've been asking about your progress." Progress. That word again, heavy with expectation and lies. I knew what this dinner really was: another performance, another stage for my mother to showcase her devotion and my supposed recovery. But this time, I also knew what was really at stake. That grant application. That $80,000. She needed witnesses. She needed people to see me improving, to corroborate her story. The relatives arrived at 6. Uncle Marcus with his booming laugh. Aunt Linda with her tight smile and judgmental eyes. My cousins, scattered across the living room with their phones, bored before the evening even began. They all greeted me with the same careful enthusiasm people reserve for the terminally ill or very fragile. "Lena, you look wonderful," Aunt Linda gushed, though her eyes scanned me like she was cataloging evidence of decline. My mother orchestrated the evening like a conductor leading an orchestra. She seated me at the head of the table, a position of honor that felt more like being on display. Every time someone asked about me, she answered before I could speak. "How's physical therapy going?" "Oh, she's making incredible strides." "Any new treatments?" "We're exploring some cutting-edge options." "Very promising." "When do the doctors think she'll walk?"
Soon.
"Very soon." The dinner conversation flowed around me like I was a statue, present but not really there. And then, halfway through dessert, my mother stood up, tapping her wine glass with a fork to get everyone's attention. "I have an announcement," she said, her face glowing with manufactured joy. "I wanted you all to be the first to know. My daughter will be walking by Christmas." The table erupted in applause. Congratulations rained down. Uncle Marcus raised his glass in a toast. And I sat there, frozen, my hands gripping my lap so hard my knuckles turned white. Christmas was 6 weeks away. In fact, my mother continued, her voice rising above the noise, why don't we show everyone right now? Come on, sweetheart. Let's show them what you can do. The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward me. I could feel the weight of their expectations, their hope, their anticipation of witnessing something miraculous. Mom, I don't think. Don't be shy. She moved behind my wheelchair, her hands on the handles. Everyone's family here. They want to support you. I can't. You haven't even tried. Her voice hardened slightly, a warning only I could hear. Come on. Just stand up for a moment. Show them you're getting stronger. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I looked around the table, at my aunt's encouraging smile, my uncle's expectant nod, my cousins finally paying attention. They all wanted to see it. They all believed her. Please, I whispered. Not like this. But my mother was already moving, reaching down to grab my arms, trying to pull me upright. The angle was wrong, the leverage was off, and pain shot through my spine like electricity. I cried out, trying to pull away, but her grip was iron. Stop, I gasped. You're hurting me. She yanked harder, her face reddening with effort and frustration. For a horrible moment, I felt myself being lifted from the chair, my body suspended at an impossible angle, my legs dragging uselessly beneath me. And then she lost her grip. I fell. Not back into the wheelchair, but forward, crashing to the floor with a violence that knocked the breath from my lungs. My chin hit the hardwood, my hands scraped against the floor trying to catch myself, and pain exploded through my entire body. Gasps filled the room. Someone screamed. Chairs scraped back as people jumped up. But my mother didn't help me. She stood there, staring down at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, undiluted rage mixed with something that looked like panic. Get up, she hissed. Stop being dramatic and get up. I couldn't. I was gasping for air, tears streaming down my face, my body shaking. I heard my aunt calling my name, my uncle saying something about calling an ambulance, but it all sounded far away. Everyone just calm down, my mother said loudly, her voice taking on that bright, controlled quality.
She's fine.
She's always been prone to theatrical displays when she doesn't get her way. Theatrical displays. As if I'd thrown myself on the floor for attention. Aunt Linda knelt beside me. Vivian, she's bleeding. Her chin. It's just a scratch. Help me get her back in the chair. But Uncle Marcus was already pulling out his phone. I'm calling for help. Don't you dare. My mother's mask finally cracked completely. This is my house, my daughter, and I will not have you treating me like I've done something wrong. She's fine. She just needs to stop being so weak all the time. The word echoed through the room.
Weak.
In the horrible silence that followed, I heard the sound of heels clicking down the hallway. Running. And then Callahan appeared in the doorway. I'd forgotten I'd texted him earlier, told him about the dinner, mentioned I was nervous. He must have been waiting outside, just in case. He took one look at me on the floor, at my mother standing over me, at the horrified faces of my relatives, and something in his expression turned to stone. What the hell happened here? His voice was quiet, but it cut through the chaos like a blade. My mother whirled on him.
You. Of course it's you.
This is none of your business. Get out of my house. But Callahan was already moving, kneeling beside me, his hands gentle as they checked for injuries. Can you hear me, Lena? Can you move your arms? I nodded weakly, and he carefully helped me into a sitting position, supporting my back. Blood dripped from my chin onto my dress, the powder blue one with lace, now stained and ruined. Someone get her wheelchair, Callahan said, and my uncle quickly brought it over. She fell, my mother insisted, her voice rising. She lost her balance. It was an accident. She fell because you pulled her out of the chair, Aunt Linda said quietly, her face pale. We all saw it, Vivian. The room went silent again. My mother looked around at her family, at their shocked faces, at the judgment in their eyes, and something in her seemed to fracture. I was trying to help her. Her voice cracked. I've given her everything. Everything. And she won't even try. She just sits there, helpless, making me look like a failure. The truth finally spilled out, raw and ugly. Not making her suffer. Not breaking her heart. Making her look like a failure. Callahan lifted me carefully back into my wheelchair, and I saw him notice something else. My wrist, where my mother had grabbed me earlier that day, was already turning purple. Another bruise to add to the collection. I'm taking her to the hospital, he said firmly. She needs to be checked for injuries. You're not taking her anywhere. Yes, he is. Uncle Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself between my mother and me. Vivian, I think you need to take a breath and calm down. This has gone far enough. My mother looked around wildly, seeing her control slipping away. The performance had failed. The audience had turned against her. And I, the star of her show, the proof of her devotion, was being wheeled away. That night, after the hospital confirmed I had a minor concussion, bruised ribs, and multiple contusions, I lay in a hospital bed staring at the ceiling. Callahan had stayed with me the whole time, and now he sat in the chair beside my bed, exhausted but watchful. This can't keep happening, he said quietly. I knew he was right, but the thought of leaving, of breaking free, of facing my mother's rage, it terrified me more than staying. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother, "Come home. We need to talk." I turned the phone face down and closed my eyes. But I knew this wasn't over. My mother wouldn't give up that easily. She'd built her entire identity around being my savior, and she'd already lied to powerful people about my progress. She needed me to walk, and she was running out of time. Whatever came next would be worse than anything before. I could feel it coming like a storm on the horizon, dark, inevitable, and devastating. I just didn't know if I was strong enough to survive it. I barely slept that night in the hospital. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face, that mixture of rage and desperation that had turned her into someone I didn't recognize. Or maybe someone I'd always known but refused to see. Morning came with harsh fluorescent lights and the sound of my mother's voice in the hallway. She was arguing with someone, a nurse, maybe, or hospital security, insisting she had every right to see her daughter. My hands gripped the thin hospital blanket as her voice grew closer. The door burst open, and there she was. Not the angry woman from last night, but the performance version again. She wore a bright blazer, coral pink, perfectly tailored, and her makeup was flawless. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her smile was wide, desperate. "Oh, sweetheart," she breathed, rushing to my bedside. I was so worried. "Are you all right?" I stared at her, unable to speak. How could she act like nothing had happened? Like she hadn't pulled me from my wheelchair, like I hadn't crashed to the floor bleeding while she called me weak? "The doctors say you can come home today," she continued, stroking my hair with trembling fingers. "And I have wonderful news. I've organized something special. Something that will change everything for us." My stomach dropped. "What did you do?" Her smile brightened, but her eyes were wild. "A recovery demonstration. Tomorrow morning. I've invited everyone, the donors from the luncheon, Dr. Harlow, some people from the medical board who are considering my grant application. Even a camera crew."
No.
The word came out as a whisper.
Mom, no.
"I can't. You can." She gripped my hand, her nails digging into my skin. "You will. This is our chance to show everyone the truth. To prove all those doubters wrong." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Today changes everything. For both of us." She left before I could argue further, making arrangements for my discharge. And I realized with growing horror that she wasn't going to stop. She couldn't stop. She'd gone too far, promised too much, lied to too many people. If I didn't perform her miracle, everything would collapse. Her reputation, her grants, her entire identity as the devoted mother who saved her daughter. And she would destroy me before she'd let that happen. By the time Callahan arrived to drive me home, my mother had arranged that too, probably to keep up appearances. I was shaking so badly, I could barely transfer into the car. He noticed immediately. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" I told him about the demonstration. about the camera crew and the donors and Dr. Harlow, about how my mother had transformed our living room into a stage and planned to make me prove I could walk in front of everyone. His face went pale. Lena, you need to refuse. You need to tell her no. You don't understand, I whispered. She won't let me refuse. She'll find a way to make me do it. She always does. Then don't go home. Stay with me, or I'll help you find emergency housing, or she'll report me as a vulnerable adult who's been kidnapped. She'll call the police. She'll make my life hell. I wiped my eyes. I just need to get through tomorrow. Then maybe things will calm down. But I didn't believe that. And from the look on Callahan's face, neither did he. When we arrived at my house, I saw the changes immediately. The living room furniture had been rearranged. Chairs lined up in rows like an auditorium. A backdrop had been set up against one wall with words I could barely stand to read. A journey of healing. Lighting equipment stood in the corners. A professional camera on a tripod. This wasn't just a small gathering, this was a production. My mother appeared from the kitchen, still wearing that bright blazer. Perfect timing. Let's get you settled. We have a lot to prepare for tomorrow. That evening felt like the longest of my life. My mother fluttered around me, arranging and rearranging things, talking nonstop about how proud everyone would be, how this would finally prove she'd been right all along. She kept saying we, like we were a team, like I had any choice in this nightmare she created. At one point, I noticed my wheelchair felt different, heavier. I reached for the control panel, and my heart stopped. The battery was missing. Mom, where's my wheelchair battery? She didn't even look up from arranging flowers. Oh, I put it away for charging. Don't worry, you won't need it tomorrow anyway. I need it now. I can't move without it. Then I guess you'll stay put. She turned to me with that frozen smile. Besides, if you can't walk, you shouldn't be so dependent on that chair, should you? Maybe this will motivate you. I was trapped, literally trapped in my own home, unable to move without help, while my mother prepared to parade me in front of cameras and strangers and force me to attempt something my body couldn't do. I tried to text Callahan, but my phone battery was dying and my charger was in my bedroom, too far to reach without the wheelchair. I managed to send one message before it died. I'm scared. His response came seconds later. Keep your phone on. I'm coming. But my phone died before I could reply. And when I asked my mother for my charger, she said she'd bring it later and never did. That night, I barely slept again. I lay in bed listening to my mother's footsteps pacing the house, hearing her talk to herself, rehearsing what she'd say to the cameras. And I realized she'd lost touch with reality. In her mind, she'd already written the ending to this story. The ending where I stood up and walked and proved her devotion had paid off. She couldn't see any other possibility. And that made her more dangerous than ever. Morning arrived too fast. My mother burst into my room before sunrise, makeup already perfect, blazer pressed. It's showtime, sweetheart, she sang, her voice unnaturally bright. Let's make you beautiful. She dressed me in white, a flowing dress that made me look angelic, innocent, like something from a religious painting. She styled my hair and did my makeup while I sat frozen, numb, going through the motions because I didn't know what else to do. By 8 in the morning, people started arriving. I recognized faces from the luncheon, wealthy women in designer clothes, men in expensive suits. Dr. Harlow arrived with his camera crew, setting up additional equipment. The room buzzed with anticipation. And then my mother wheeled me out into the living room, positioning me at the center of the makeshift stage. The lights were blinding. I could barely see the faces in the crowd, just shapes and shadows, and the unblinking eye of the camera lens. My mother stood beside me, one hand on my shoulder, possessive, controlling. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice projecting perfectly. Today, you're going to witness something extraordinary. My daughter has been on a remarkable journey, and today marks a turning point. Today, she's going to show you what determination and love can accomplish. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Someone started clapping, and others joined in. My mother basked in it, feeding off their attention like oxygen. Dr. Harlow stepped forward, taking his position as the expert. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been working with Lena intensively on breaking through her mental barriers. The mind is a powerful thing. It can heal or it can limit us. Today, we're going to demonstrate the power of belief over perceived limitation. Perceived limitation. My spinal injury documented, diagnosed, permanent, reduced to a perception problem. My mother leaned down, her lips close to my ear, her voice a whisper only I could hear. Stand up.
Right now.
Or I'm taking the wheelchair away permanently. I swear to God, Lena, I will leave you with nothing. My whole body trembled. The room swam in my vision. This was it, the moment she'd been building toward, the performance that would either save her reputation or destroy her completely. And she'd made it clear. She'd rather destroy me than face that failure. I gripped the armrests, my hands slick with sweat. The crowd fell silent, watching, waiting. My mother's smile never wavered, but her fingers dug into my shoulder like claws. I pushed. I pushed with everything I had, every muscle in my upper body straining. I felt my mother's hand on my back, shoving me forward, and for one horrible second I was rising, lifted by her force more than my own strength. And then my legs gave out completely. My knees buckled like paper. And I fell. Not gracefully. Not carefully. I pitched forward with violent force, my body slamming into the floor with a sickening thud that echoed through the room. Pain exploded through my skull. My hands scraped against the hardwood. Blood. I tasted blood in my mouth. The gasps that filled the room sounded like wind rushing through a tunnel. Someone screamed. But louder than anything was my mother's voice, shrill and desperate. Get up. You can do it.
Get up.
I couldn't. I was gasping for air, my vision blurring, my body refusing to cooperate. And my mother wasn't helping. She was yelling, pulling at my arms, trying to drag me upright like a puppet. Stop. The voice cut through the chaos like a gunshot. You're hurting her. Nurse Callahan appeared in the doorway. He'd come, just like he promised. His face went white as he took in the scene. Me on the floor bleeding, my mother standing over me, the horrified crowd, the cameras still rolling. He pushed through people, dropping to his knees beside me. His hands were gentle as they checked my head, my neck, looking for serious injuries. I saw fresh bruises forming on my arms where my mother had grabbed me. Dr. Harlow tried to intervene, stepping forward with his practiced smile. This is all part of the process. Sometimes breakthrough requires. Breakthrough? Callahan's voice was low, dangerous. She has a documented spinal cord injury. Your pseudotherapy could cause permanent damage. Or, did you even bother to review her actual medical records? Harlow's smile faltered. The camera crew shifted uncomfortably, clearly uncertain if they should keep filming. My mother was spiraling, her voice rising higher and higher. Get away from her. This is my daughter. My house. You have no right. I have every right to protect a patient from abuse. Callahan said the word clearly, deliberately, making sure everyone in the room heard it. Abuse. The crowd stirred. Whispers rippled through them. And for the first time, I saw my mother's performance fail completely. Her mask cracked, then shattered, revealing the desperate, obsessive woman underneath. You're ruining everything, she screamed at Callahan, at me, at everyone. She can walk. She just won't. She's doing this to humiliate me, to make me look like a failure. There it was. The truth she'd hidden behind all the devotion and love and carefully staged moments. This was never about helping me. It was about her. It had always been about her. The room fell silent. Even the camera crew had stopped filming. Guests stood frozen, clearly uncomfortable, clearly realizing they'd witnessed something terrible. Callahan helped me into my wheelchair. Someone had retrieved the battery from wherever my mother had hidden it. As he wheeled me toward the door, guests silently stepped aside. No one was clapping now. No one was congratulating my mother on her devotion. They were staring at her with something between pity and horror. And my mother stood alone in her living room, surrounded by her stage and her lights and her carefully crafted backdrop, watching her performance and her perfect life collapse around her. Callahan's car smelled like coffee and antiseptic. I sat in the passenger seat, my wheelchair folded in the back, my hands still shaking as we drove toward the hospital. He kept glancing at me, checking if I was okay, but I couldn't speak. My throat was tight with something between terror and relief. "I need to take you to the ER," he said gently. "You hit your head hard. We need to make sure there's no serious damage." I nodded numbly. Behind us, my mother's house grew smaller in the rearview mirror, but I could still feel the weight of what had happened. The cameras, the crowd, the moment my mother's mask finally, irrevocably shattered. At the hospital, everything moved in a blur. Nurses checked my vitals. A doctor examined the cut on my chin, the bruises forming across my arms. They took me for imaging, CT scan, X-rays, checking for injuries that went deeper than the surface. I lay in the scanning machine, listening to it hum and click, and thought about how many times I'd been in these machines before. After the accident, during recovery, for checkups and complications. But this time was different. This time, the injuries weren't from an accident. They were from my mother. The doctor returned with films in hand, her expression serious. "Lena, we found some concerning things. You have new inflammation in your lumbar spine, and there are signs of strain that suggest forceful manipulation. Can you tell me what happened?" I looked at Callahan, who stood quietly in the corner. He gave me an encouraging nod. "My mother," I whispered. "She tried to make me stand. She pulled me hard." The doctor's jaw tightened. "She made notes on her tablet, her movements deliberate. This kind of manipulation on an injury like yours is incredibly dangerous. You could have sustained permanent damage."
Do you understand that?
I nodded. My mother had been willing to cripple me further just to prove she could make me walk. Callahan stepped forward. "Doctor, this isn't the first incident. I've witnessed multiple occasions where the patient was pressured or physically forced to attempt movements beyond her capability." "Is this true, Lena?" The question hung in the air. This was my chance. My chance to tell the truth, to finally speak the words I'd been swallowing for 3 years. But years of conditioning made my throat tight, made my mother's voice echo in my head. "Don't make me look bad. Don't be dramatic. Don't ruin this for me." "This is abuse, not care," Callahan said quietly, stepping beside me. "And she deserves to be safe." The word again. Abuse. Each time someone said it, it became more real, harder to deny. "Yes," I whispered. "It's true." The doctor nodded slowly. "I need to document this. And I'm required to report it." Before I could respond, my mother's voice echoed from the hallway.
Where is she?
"Where's my daughter? You can't keep me from her." She burst through the door, her makeup smeared now, her perfect blazer wrinkled. She looked wild, desperate. When she saw me, relief flashed across her face, quickly replaced by that familiar performance. "Oh, thank God you're all right." She rushed toward me, but Callahan stepped between us. "I was so worried when you left without saying anything." "Ma'am, you need to step back." The doctor's voice was firm. My mother's eyes darted around the room, reading the situation. This is ridiculous. She's prone to exaggeration. She always has been. A little fall, and suddenly, it's a medical emergency. A little fall? A nurse who'd been checking my vitals looked up, her voice sharp. "She has a concussion, multiple contusions, and aggravated spinal inflammation." This wasn't a little fall. It was an accident. She lost her balance. That's not what the witnesses said. The doctor pulled out her phone, showing my mother something on the screen. Someone posted the live stream online. "We've seen the footage." My mother's face went pale. The camera crew, Dr. Harlow's team. Of course they'd posted it. It was supposed to be her triumph, her proof. Instead, it was evidence. "That video doesn't show. It's taken out of context," my mother stammered. "It shows you pulling your daughter out of her wheelchair and forcing her to attempt standing despite her protests. It shows her falling and you continuing to pressure her instead of helping." The doctor's voice was clinical, detached. "Ma'am, I need you to step outside."
Now.
"She's my daughter. And right now, She's my patient. Outside. Security appeared at the door. Someone had called them, anticipating this. My mother looked at me, her eyes pleading, desperate. Lena, tell them. Tell them I would never hurt you. Tell them I was just trying to help. I opened my mouth. Part of me, the part that had been trained for years to protect her, to make excuses, to smooth everything over, wanted to say the words she needed to hear. But I was so tired of performing, so tired of being her proof, her project, her puppet. You hurt me, I said quietly. You've been hurting me for a long time. Something in my mother's face crumbled, then hardened, then twisted into something ugly. After everything I've done for you, she hissed. After everything I've sacrificed. Outside.
Now.
Security moved forward, and my mother had no choice but to leave. As they escorted her down the hall, I heard her voice rising, making threats, making promises, insisting this wasn't over. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of her threats. A social worker arrived an hour later, a woman with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. She introduced herself as Ms. Chun and pulled up a chair beside my bed. Lena, I'm here because the hospital filed a concern. Several concerns, actually. I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to be honest with me. Do you feel safe at home? The question felt enormous. Safe. What did that even mean anymore? I'd lived with my mother for 3 years since the accident, and before that my whole life. She was the only family I had left after my father died. Where else would I go? But safety wasn't about having nowhere else to go. Safety was about not being afraid in your own home. About not waking up wondering what performance you'd have to give that day. About not being treated like a problem that needed fixing.
No, y whispered.
I don't feel safe. Ms. Chen nodded, making notes. Callahan stood in the corner, witnessing, supporting without interfering. And I felt something shift inside me, like a weight I'd been carrying for years finally beginning to lift. Can you tell me about other incidents? Times when you felt unsafe or were hurt. I told her everything. The locked wheelchair brakes. The hidden battery. The threats. Dr. Harlow and the $12,000. The pressure to perform, to stand, to prove I was getting better even when my body couldn't. The bruises. The way my mother spoke to me differently when we were alone versus when people were watching. Ms. Chen listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. My mother tried to barge in again. This time, Ms. Chen stood up and met her at the door. Ma'am, this is a private conversation. You need to step outside. Private? With my own daughter? Who do you think you are? I'm a social worker conducting an investigation into allegations of abuse. And right now you're interfering with that investigation. Ms. Chen's voice was calm, but immovable. If you continue to disrupt this process, I'll have security remove you from the hospital entirely. My mother's face cycled through emotions, rage, panic, calculation. Finally, she backed away, but her eyes were locked on me. I could read the message clearly. You're going to regret this. After Ms. Chen finished her interview, she made some calls. I heard fragments of conversation, emergency placement, protective custody, financial investigation. Each phrase made my mother's situation more real, more serious. A hospital accountant arrived, asking questions about my medical expenses and insurance. That's when things got worse for my mother. The accountant discovered discrepancies, large ones. The grant money my mother had received didn't align with my actual medical care. Thousands of dollars were unaccounted for. Ms. Harrison, the accountant said carefully, can you explain where the funds designated for your daughter's long-term care have been allocated? My mother stood in the hallway. They wouldn't let her back in my room, but we could hear her through the partially open door. I've used that money exactly as intended. For her care. 4 treatments. 4. According to these records, your daughter hasn't received most of the treatments you claimed in your grant applications. And the treatments she did receive don't match the amounts withdrawn from the fund. That's impossible. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake, ma'am. We've cross-referenced with insurance claims, medical records, and facility billing. The money isn't where you said it was. Silence. Then my mother's voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it. I was going to pay it back. Once she was walking again, once the new grant came through, I was going to replace it all. That's fraud, ma'am. The word echoed down the hallway.
Fraud.
Added to abuse. Added to medical neglect. Added to endangering a disabled adult. I heard my mother start to cry, real tears this time, not the performative kind she used for audiences. But I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not after everything. A police officer arrived around 7 that evening. Young professional with a notepad and a body camera. He asked my mother to come with him to answer some questions. She tried to refuse, tried to claim this was all a misunderstanding, tried to play the victim. But too many people had seen too much. The live stream, the witnesses, the medical evidence. Her own words caught on camera. "You're doing this," she said, pointing at me from the hallway. "You're destroying your own mother. After everything I did for you, everything I gave up. Everything you did was for yourself," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "I was never your daughter. I was your project, your proof, your way to get money and attention and admiration. I loved you. You loved what I could do for you. There's a difference." The officer escorted her away. As they walked down the hall, I heard her shouting, bargaining, threatening. The performance wasn't working anymore. No one was applauding. And I sat in my hospital bed, exhausted but strangely light, watching my mother disappear around the corner. For the first time in years, I could breathe. They kept me at the hospital overnight for observation. The concussion wasn't severe, but the doctors wanted to monitor me. I think they also wanted to keep me away from my mother while the investigation moved forward. Either way, I didn't complain. The hospital bed was more comfortable than any night I'd spent at home in recent memory. Callahan stayed with me until visiting hours ended. Before he left, he squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "The hardest thing, but the right thing." I wasn't sure I believed him yet. Part of me still felt guilty, like I'd betrayed my mother, like I should have tried harder to protect her. Years of conditioning didn't disappear overnight. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. A woman I hadn't seen in over a decade stood in my doorway, her face pale and drawn. It took me a moment to recognize her, my mother's younger sister, Aunt Caroline. "Lena," she breathed, rushing to my bedside. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I should have come sooner. I should have," she broke off, tears streaming down her face. I'd forgotten I even had an aunt. My mother had cut off contact with her family years ago, citing some vague disagreement. We never talked about them. It was like that entire side of the family had been erased. "How did you know I was here?" I asked. "I saw the live stream. Someone shared it and I recognized Vivian immediately." She pulled up a chair, her hands shaking. "I drove all night to get here. Lena, I need to tell you something. Something about your mother. Something that might help you understand." I wasn't sure I wanted to understand. Understanding felt dangerous, like it might make me sympathize, might make me reconsider. But Aunt Caroline looked so desperate, so guilty, that I nodded. "Your mother grew up in a house that was brutal," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our mother, your grandmother, she was obsessed with appearances, with perfection. Any sign of weakness was met with punishment. Physical punishment, but also emotional cruelty that left deeper scars." I listened, my stomach tightening. "When Vivian was 16, our younger brother, your Uncle James, he was diagnosed with epilepsy. He had seizures. It was manageable with medication, but our mother, she saw it as shameful, embarrassing. She told people he was away at boarding school, but really she'd basically locked him in his room. Refused to take him to doctors because she didn't want anyone to know." "What happened to him?" I asked, though I already knew the answer wouldn't be good. "He died when he was 18. A seizure that could have been prevented with proper medication." Aunt Caroline wiped her eyes. After that, Vivian changed. She became obsessed with never showing weakness, never being vulnerable, never letting anyone see anything less than perfection. She cut off our entire family because we reminded her of what happened. Because we knew the truth. I felt something inside me shift. This didn't excuse what my mother had done, but it explained the desperation, the obsession, the way she'd turned my injury into a personal failure that had to be fixed at any cost. When you had her accident, Caroline continued, I wanted to reach out, but Vivian made it clear I wasn't welcome. She said she was handling everything, that you were her responsibility, not mine. She grabbed my hand. I should have fought harder. I should have checked on you. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, I said quietly. She's very good at keeping people away. I know. I learned that growing up with her. Caroline hesitated. But Lena, you need to know what she did to you. It's the same cycle our mother put us through. The pressure to perform. The inability to accept imperfection. The rage when reality didn't match her fantasy. Vivian became exactly what she swore she'd never be. The words hung between us. My mother had spent her life running from her past, only to recreate it with me as the victim instead of her. Meanwhile, across town at the police station, my mother was facing an entirely different kind of reckoning. I wouldn't learn the details until later, but Callahan told me what happened. She'd been brought in for questioning about the grant fraud, the medical neglect, the physical endangerment. At first, she maintained her composure, insisting everything was a misunderstanding, that she was the victim of a conspiracy to destroy her reputation. But as the officers presented evidence, the financial records, the falsified grant applications, the video footage, the witness statements, her facade began to crack. I was fixing her, she finally said, her voice rising. Someone had to fix her. She was broken, and I was the only one who cared enough to do what needed to be done. The officer conducting the interview remained calm. Ma'am, your daughter has a documented spinal cord injury. She's not broken. She's disabled. There's a difference. There shouldn't be. She shouldn't have to be disabled. I gave her everything, the best doctors, the best care, years of my life, and she's still in that chair.
Still weak.
Still making me look like I failed. This isn't about you, ma'am. Everything is about me. The words exploded out of her. I built my entire life around being the perfect mother, the devoted caretaker, the woman who never gave up on her daughter. If she doesn't walk, then what was it all for? What did I sacrifice everything for? The officer made a note. What did you sacrifice? Everything.
My social life.
My career opportunities. My dignity, watching people pity me. And the money. Do you know how expensive it is to maintain appearances? To host events? To wear the right clothes? To project success? I had to use some of the care funds just to keep up the image of a mother who had everything under control. So, you committed fraud. My mother fell silent. The reality of what she'd admitted seemed to hit her all at once. I was going to pay it back, she whispered. Once Lena walked again. Once I got the new grant. It was temporary. It was all temporary until everything was perfect again. Your daughter may never walk again, Miss Harrison. Her injury is permanent.
No.
No, you don't understand. She just needs to try harder. She needs the right motivation. She needs to be safe. And she wasn't safe with you. That's when my mother finally broke down completely. Not the performative tears she'd used at parties, but something raw and ugly and real. She sobbed into her hands, her carefully constructed identity shattering like glass. I didn't want to be like my mother, she gasped between sobs. I swore I'd never be like her. I swore I'd be different. But you weren't, the officer said quietly. You became exactly what you were running from. Back at the hospital, Aunt Caroline stayed with me through the afternoon. She told me stories about my mother as a child, the girl who'd been crushed under impossible expectations, who'd watched her brother die from neglect, who'd built walls so high around herself that no one could see the damage underneath. I don't think she ever processed what happened to James, Caroline said. She never grieved, never got help. She just decided to be perfect, to never show weakness, to prove she was nothing like our mother. But trauma doesn't work that way. You can't just decide to be different. You have to do the work. She made me her work instead, I said quietly.
Yes, she did.
Caroline squeezed my hand. And that was wrong. Understanding why someone hurt you doesn't mean forgiving them. It just means you can stop wondering if you deserved it. Those words settled into my chest like a key turning in a lock. I didn't deserve what my mother had done.
Her pain didn't justify mine.
Her trauma didn't excuse her abuse. That evening, after Caroline left to find a hotel, I lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling. I thought about cycles, how trauma passes from generation to generation like a genetic disease, how hurt people, how my mother had spent her entire life trying to escape her past only to drag me into it. But I also thought about how cycles could be broken, how I could choose a different path, how I didn't have to carry her damage forward. A nurse came in to check my vitals and found me crying, not from pain, but from something that felt like grief and relief mixed together. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. I nodded. "I think I will be." For the first time in years, I actually believed it. The next morning, Aunt Caroline returned with an envelope in her hands. She looked nervous, almost guilty, as she sat beside my bed. "I've been holding on to something," she said quietly. "Your father's trust documents. The ones establishing the medical fund for your care." My heart skipped. My mother said she was managing that fund. She was. But she wasn't supposed to be the only one with access. Caroline opened the envelope, pulling out official-looking papers. "Your father specified that when you turned 25, control of the fund would transfer to you. Or sooner, if there was evidence of mismanagement." I'm 27. I know. Caroline's face crumpled with guilt. "Your mother told me you'd signed papers choosing to keep her as the manager." I believed her. I shouldn't have, but I did. And then when I saw that video yesterday, I knew. I knew she'd been lying about everything. She handed me the papers. My hands shook as I read through them. The fund was substantial, nearly $200,000, meant to cover my care for years. But according to the account statements Caroline had requested, less than $60,000 remained. My mother had stolen from me. Not borrowed. Stolen. "There's a process to transfer control," Caroline explained. "You'll need to sign some paperwork, file a complaint with the bank. But Lena, this money is yours. It was always supposed to be yours." That afternoon, I signed everything. Forms to transfer the fund control. Forms to authorize an audit of how the money had been spent. Forms to ensure my mother could never touch it again. It felt like taking back a piece of myself. Ms. Chun, the social worker, visited again that evening. She had updates, most of them grim for my mother, but liberating for me. "The police are moving forward with multiple charges," she said. "Medical neglect, financial fraud, emotional abuse, and endangering a disabled adult. The prosecutor believes they have a strong case, especially with the video evidence and witness testimony." "What does that mean for her?" I asked. "Jail time, potentially.
Finis.
Mandatory counseling. Loss of access to any funds designated for your care. And a restraining order if you want one." A restraining order. Legal protection from my own mother. Part of me felt guilty even considering it. But another part, the part that had been suffocated for 3 years, the part that had been forced to perform and stand and prove myself over and over, that part wanted the protection. "Yes," I said. "I want the restraining order." Ms. Chen nodded. "I'll file the paperwork today. In the meantime, we've arranged temporary placement for you in an assisted living facility with accessibility accommodations. It's just until we can find you a more permanent situation. I can't go back to the house. Not while your mother has access to it. And honestly, Lena, I don't think you should. That environment isn't safe for you." She was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of leaving the only home I'd known, of starting completely over, terrified me. Callahan must have seen the fear on my face because he spoke up from the corner where he'd been quietly observing. "You won't be alone in this. I'll help you transition. And I'll continue your physical therapy at the new facility. You don't have to do that." "I know. But I'm going to anyway." He smiled slightly. "Someone needs to make sure you're getting actual medical care instead of motivational nonsense." Despite everything, I laughed. It felt strange, foreign, like a muscle I'd forgotten how to use. The discharge process took 2 days. Paperwork. Arrangements. phone calls with agencies and facilities and lawyers. My mother tried to call repeatedly, but the hospital blocked her number. She tried to visit, but security turned her away. She was learning that her control over me had finally, permanently, ended. The assisted living facility was nothing like I expected. Bright, modern, with staff who treated me like a person instead of a problem. They helped me settle into a small but comfortable room with an accessible bathroom, adjustable furniture, and a window that overlooked a garden. For the first time in 3 years, I had privacy. Agency. Space that was mine alone. Callahan came 3 times a week for physical therapy. Real physical therapy, the kind that respected my limitations while helping me build strength. He never pushed me to do more than I could. Never treated my disability as something to overcome or cure. Just something to work with. "How are you adjusting?" he asked one day, about 2 weeks after I'd left the hospital. "It's strange," I admitted. "I keep waiting for something bad to happen. Like I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop." "That's normal. You spent years in survival mode. Your body hasn't learned yet that you're safe now." Safe. That word again. I was starting to believe it. Ms. Chun connected me with a support group for survivors of parental abuse. I went to my first meeting terrified, convinced I wouldn't fit in, that my story wasn't bad enough to count. But as people shared their experiences, the manipulation, the control, the way love got twisted into something toxic, I realized I wasn't alone. These people understood. They'd lived it too. A woman named Brenda, who was about my age, spoke about her mother who'd controlled every aspect of her life through guilt and financial manipulation. The hardest part, she said, was realizing that loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you. Her words echoed in my head for days. 6 weeks after I'd left the hospital, my mother requested a supervised meeting. Ms. Chun presented it as my choice. I could refuse if I wanted. But part of me needed to see her. Needed to say things I'd never been able to say before. The meeting took place in a neutral office, with Ms. Chun present as a mediator. My mother arrived looking smaller than I remembered. Her hair wasn't styled perfectly. Her makeup was minimal. The blazers and designer clothes had been replaced with a simple sweater. She looked human. Broken.
Real.
We sat across from each other at a table. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "I wanted the world to admire me." "I know," I said quietly, "but I just wanted my mother." Her face crumpled. "I thought I was helping you. I thought if I could just make you walk again, everything would be okay. You'd be happy. I'd be a good mother. Everyone would see that I did everything right. But it was never about me being happy. It was about you looking good." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. After a moment, she nodded. "You're right. I made it about me.
I always make everything about me.
My therapist says, she says I have a lot of work to do." "I hope you do that work," I said. And I meant it. Not for her sake, but because I didn't want anyone else to suffer what I'd suffered. "Can you forgive me?" she asked, her voice small. I thought about that question carefully. Forgiveness felt too big, too complicated. Maybe someday.
But not now.
Not when the wounds were still fresh. "I can understand why you did what you did," I said finally. "But I'm not ready to forgive. And I need distance from you. For my own healing." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I understand." As we left that meeting, I felt lighter. I'd said what I needed to say. I'd set the boundary I needed to set. And I'd done it without cruelty, without revenge, just with honesty. 3 months later, I moved into my own accessible apartment through a fast-tracked social services program. It was small but mine. I decorated it myself, bright colors, plants, pictures of places I wanted to visit someday. No wheelchairs hidden as a punishment.
No locked doors. No performances.
Just space to be myself. Callahan helped me move in, along with Aunt Caroline and a few people from my support group. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor. Well, they sat on the floor while I stayed in my chair, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The legal case against my mother moved forward. She pleaded guilty to several charges and received probation, fines, and mandatory therapy. She lost all access to my medical fund. The restraining order remained in place. I didn't attend the hearings. I didn't need to. That chapter was closed. One evening, about 6 months after everything had changed, I attended a community event for disability rights. It was held at a local community center, and the room was filled with people who understood what it meant to navigate a world that wasn't built for us. Someone asked if I wanted to share my story. For a moment, I hesitated. Speaking up felt dangerous, vulnerable, like opening myself to judgment. But then I thought about Brenda from my support group, about Callahan, who'd stood up for me when I couldn't stand up for myself, about Aunt Caroline, who'd driven through the night to help a niece she barely knew. I wheeled myself to the microphone. "My name is Lena," I began, my voice shaking slightly. And for a long time, I thought healing meant becoming what other people wanted me to be. It meant standing up literally to prove I was worthy of love and care. It meant performing recovery even when my body couldn't deliver. People in the audience nodded. They understood. But I learned something important. I continued, my voice growing stronger. Healing isn't about pleasing others. It's not about meeting someone else's expectations or timeline. It's about reclaiming yourself. It's about building a life that respects who you are right now, not who someone wishes you would become. When I finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. But more importantly, people came up to me afterward to share their own stories, to say thank you, to tell me I'd given voice to something they'd felt but couldn't express. In the front row, Callahan watched with quiet pride. He nodded at me, just a small gesture of acknowledgement, and I smiled back. That night, as I returned to my apartment, I sat by the window looking out at the city lights. I thought about my mother, about the cycle of trauma she'd never broken, about the damage that had been passed down through generations. But I also thought about choices, about how I could choose differently, about how I could build a life based on authenticity instead of performance, on self-acceptance instead of proving my worth. I would never walk again. The doctors had made that clear. My spinal injury was permanent. But for the first time in 3 years, I was standing, not on my legs, but on the foundation of my own life. On my own terms. In my own way.
And that was enough.
More than enough. It was everything. When does protecting your own life become more important than protecting the person who gave it to you? If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories about breaking free and finding yourself.